Hi, I realise that a lot of you don't know about my career before making content, which was a hugely successful career in the movies. I worked on about 50 massive Hollywood films, and I guess a lot of you don't know about it. Everything from James Bond to Fast and Furious, Pirates of the Caribbean, Madagascar, Inception, Moulin Rouge, Zoolander, Ocean's 11, 12, 13, another James Bond film, Predator, Transformers. I could go on, and I'm going to go on telling you all about it. So let's get into it. So I realised from a lot of comments I've been getting that a lot of you don't know about my movie career of doing like 50 big Hollywood films before I started making content. That was my day job for 20 years. And yeah, I realised that I haven't really told that story, and it's interesting perhaps for some of you guys to get an insight into my life before this, which was kind of exciting. And yeah, I can't believe I worked on so many big films that you would know. And so I thought I would go into it and tell you how that all happened. It was all kind of a magical mistake. And yeah, let's get into it. Before I get started, I just want to say I know I was supposed to drop the Alfie video today of our boys' day out, but there's so much cuteness. It was confusing. I don't know which bits to put in and which bits not to put in. So I'm still working on that. That's going to be coming soon. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. If you like what I'm doing, please hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. So yeah, where do I get started? When I was 13, I discovered music. I'd never really thought about it before, but my parents were mad into pop music. They would just play the pop music radio all day long in my house. So it kind of seeped into my subconscious, I think. But when I was 13, my dad got me a synthesizer, and I was so completely obsessed by it, it became like an autistic special interest. And I blame autism for my hugely successful Hollywood career. So, you know, there's an upside. So yeah, this became my special interest. So I just did that. I just was obsessed with music, and that's all I did. I didn't go to school. I wouldn't shower. I wouldn't even remember to eat sometimes because it was such an obsession. So I just obsessed on that, and by the time I was 15, I got a record deal because I was making these little pop music demos in my house on my own, autistic again. So I was like completely obsessed with this thing. I ended up with a record deal, and the people that signed me said, "Why don't you come and live in our studio for a while? Because we're building a studio, you can live upstairs." So I finished school. I didn't finish school. I have no qualifications at all. 0 qualifications in life. I don't even have the most basic qualification in England because I didn't finish high school. I left at 15 and I just pursued this dream. So I moved to London, lived upstairs in a recording studio. And while I was there, I fell in love with electronic music, and guys that were working in the studio opened my mind to classical music and things like that. And all this kind of merged in my brain as like the next phase of what I was doing. And I eventually dropped the singing because I was A, terrible, and B, couldn't write lyrics. And the minute I dropped that, things started to work and become more successful. So I started making electronic music, and it was right at the time that clubs became a big thing in London and electronic music became a big thing. And it just so happened that one of the people that was going out to the clubs was the son of Ridley Scott, who did Blade Runner and Alien. His name was Jake Scott. And he was a commercial director, and he used one of my pieces in one of his commercials. And then he got his first film. And he was like, well, instead of just using Stephen's music in my film as from the record, why don't he just do the music? So it was a crazy thing. I was in my early 20s, maybe 21, and I was suddenly doing a film, and they put me together with the guy that just did orchestral music, which blew my mind. like someone, a modern day classical composer. So we both like clenched our styles together and we came up with this crazy score that was really, because it was so unusual, it had never been done before, this mixture of electronic and orchestral, and it was on a film that was set in the 1800s. It had Liv Tyler in it and one of the guys from Trainspotting. It didn't do well commercially, but it really got noticed because the music was so crazy. So then from that, we got asked to do a little film called Moulin Rouge. And that was mind-blowing. I'd only really been on 2 or 3 flights in my whole life at this point, and suddenly we're being flown first class to Sydney from London, which is a 26-hour flight. Mind-blowing. I was so excited I didn't sleep. And we get to Australia, and Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman are still shooting because it's a musical. You do the music quite early on while they're shooting. So it was crazy to see that, and I got on really well with Ewan McGregor, and that was all great. And then they were like, okay, Stephen, we want you to work on this one scene for these 4 days. And the guy I was working with worked on the love theme of Nicole Kidman. The scene they wanted me to work on was the Elephant Love Medley, which turned out being the most iconic scene in that film, where they're coming down the elephant, singing to each other. So yeah, that was the first thing I did on Moulin Rouge, and that led into doing a ton of work on that film. So that was an incredible start, and that happened really quick, and just completely accidentally. I can't read or write music. Did I say that before? Like, technically, I can't read or write music. I do it all by ear, and I do it all instinctively. And I don't know anyone else that does film music that can't read or write music, because it's so technical getting the thing to match with the picture. And I just do it all on instinct, and I also blame autism for that, because I don't know anyone else that does that at the level I was working at. So yeah, it was a crazy ride. And then one of the guys that noticed Moulin Rouge was David Arnold, who was doing all the James Bond films. So he called me up and said, do you want to work on a James Bond film with me? And I was like, yeah. So off I trot to Air Studios in London, meet him, and we do The World Is Not Enough, which is the James Bond film from the early 2000s, I think it was. So then again, I'm like, what the hell is going on? How is this happening? It was just I feel like it was a higher power thing, and my autism, which is maybe a higher power thing too, just coming together to propel me to this thing that I never imagined would happen. So still in my early 20s, I'm doing a James Bond film, and there's only 3 of us working on it. So it's a super small team, and we're dealing directly with the woman that owns James Bond, Barbara Broccoli. It was just a crazy experience. And so that led on to another guy who's this DJ from Belfast called David Holmes. He had just been offered the chance to have a crack at Ocean's 11, which was this film. They're like, Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts and George Clooney are all in this one film. I'm like, what? Do you want to work on it? I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, this might be a 2-part series, because there's a lot to get into, because I'm also going to tell you about producing bands alongside this. Just got to check that's recording. So alongside this, long story short, as that's happening, I'm also being asked to produce bands, because the bands had heard the music I was doing as well. So at the same time this is happening, Depeche Mode asked me to produce a few tracks on their album. So early 20s, autistic, we've done 1 big movie, 2 big movies by now, and at the same time working with Depeche Mode. Completely insane. Depeche Mode led on to Massive Attack, which happened at the same time as Ocean's 11, but in between those 2 things, there was a little movie called Zoolander. and I'm going to get into that in part 2. There's a lot to get to. I hope you enjoyed this. I just realized that a lot of you didn't know this, so I wanted to make a video about it. I thought, interesting, right? Let's do part 2 tomorrow. If you like this, let me know in the comments.